Please, I'm begging you, untie it. The human hesitated, then defied every law. The heat pressed down on Halix Primaris like a solid weight. Noonlight burned against the pale metal and glass of the plaza, flattening every shadow into sharp edges. The ceremonial sand ring, 50 meters of polished, pale dust surrounded by a waist-high rail, sat at the heart of the square. Around it, citizens lingered in quiet clusters, their faces expressionless. This was how the city enforced order. Public correction without violence, shame made into a civic event. In the center of the ring, a woman knelt. Her skin had the faint shimmer of violet under the glare, her white hair plastered to her back with sweat and sand. Her wrists and ankles were tied with rope to 4 stakes driven into the sand. The ropes weren't crude. They were arranged with precision, spaced evenly, each knot identical. The punishment wasn't designed to injure. It was meant to humiliate. The display said, "We can make even your defiance look organized." The woman's name was Narration Sora, a stage performer known in the outer sectors of Halix for refusing to wear the city's approved masks during public recitals. She'd been cited twice before for nonconformity, a charge so vague it could fit anything that made officials uncomfortable. She hadn't expected an arrest today. She had simply sung one of her own songs at a civic ceremony, eyes uncovered. The guards had come for her afterward, calm and polite, guiding her here while explaining that resistance only lengthened the penalty. She hadn't resisted. She wanted them to see her eyes while they tied her down. Across the plaza, Ray Vardon stopped in front of the warning plaque fixed to the railing. Civic penalty, cultural noncompliance. The words were clean and bloodless. He read them twice before glancing into the ring. He wasn't supposed to be here. He was on a break between shifts, sent to inspect atmospheric filters near the northern arcade. His job was simple: maintain airflow, monitor humidity, keep the city breathing. A quiet life after 10 years in the field corps. He had chosen this district for its silence, its civility. But as he watched the bound woman in the sand, the silence started to feel wrong, sterile, complicit. He looked at the crowd. No one moved. A few held out small recording devices. One man adjusted his tie. The heat shimmered above the sand, and still no one stepped forward. Ray's stomach tightened. It wasn't anger. It was something quieter, heavier. He'd seen enough restraint used as control during his years off-world. The last colony he served on had called it rehabilitation through demonstration. He'd told himself that Halix was different. His palms felt damp. He flexed his fingers once, the habit of a soldier trying to make a decision before the hesitation set in. He could walk away. That would be the safer choice. He wasn't a soldier anymore. He had no authority here. But the thought of going home, of drinking water in his tidy apartment while that image stayed in his head, a woman displayed like furniture, made him feel sick. He stepped forward. The fine sand shifted beneath his boots. Heads turned, but no one spoke. The guards near the entrance didn't move. They were there for appearance, not enforcement. He crossed the short distance to the center. Neriai's eyes met his before he could say anything. Up close, he could see how exhausted she was, her arms strained, her lips dry, the muscles in her neck trembling from holding still so long. But her gaze stayed steady. "Look at me," Ray said. His voice sounded rough in the hot air. "I'm looking," she replied. Her throat rasped when she spoke. "Untie it." Ray hesitated. Cameras dotted the rail. Round, black lenses built into the chrome. They probably weren't active, but the thought of being seen mattered less than the thought of not acting. He took one slow breath and knelt beside her. The rope was tight and coarse, sun-heated against his fingers. He worked the first knot loose with controlled movements, forcing his mind to stay steady. The last time he'd untied someone, it had been in a medical tent, not a city square. Neri didn't move while he worked. Her eyes followed his hands. Sweat ran down her temple, cutting a faint line through the dust. She could smell the dry metal scent of his coat, the faint trace of machine oil. There was no aggression in his touch, only concentration. Her fear eased a little, though her pulse still hammered. Every second, she expected a voice to order him away, a weapon to lift, a camera to flash red. Nothing happened. The city kept watching in silence. When her first wrist came free, blood returned to her hand in a dull, throbbing wave. She almost gasped but caught herself. Ray moved to the next, not without looking at her face. The sound of ropes sliding against wood broke the stillness, followed by the soft collapse of sand as he tossed the coil aside. He could feel the weight of the onlookers pressing against his back, but he didn't turn around. An official in a cream uniform appeared at the railing, voice amplified but even. "Citizen," he called, "you are interfering with an active civic correction." Ray didn't stop. "You're done," he said quietly, loosening the last rope around her ankle. "If you got paperwork, send it to Maintenance Block 7. The official froze. The tone wasn't defiant, it was factual. There was nothing to respond to. The crowd shifted uneasily, sensing the imbalance. Ray coiled the loose ropes and set them neatly beside the stake. Neary-Eye pushed her palms into the sand and stood. Her legs shook but held. She brushed grit from her knees, her expression unreadable. For a second, the plaza felt suspended in time. He straightened and looked at her directly. "Can you walk?" "I can." Her voice steadied. "Name?" "Ray." "Neary-Eye," she said, lifting her chin, now untied. The faintest trace of a smile touched her mouth, half defiance, half relief. Ray nodded once. Then he turned and offered his hand. She took it, her skin still warm from the sun. Together, they stepped toward the rail. No one moved to stop them. The official lowered his tablet, uncertain. Civilians shifted aside automatically, more afraid of confrontation than of law. As they crossed the plaza, Ray's mind ran through the consequences. He would lose his work permit, maybe face civic review. But the tension in his chest loosened for the first time in months. He realized he'd already made peace with the outcome the moment he'd taken the first step onto the sand. Behind them, the ceremonial ring gleamed in the sunlight, clean, empty, ready for the next lesson. The crowd didn't follow them, but the silence did. It stretched across the plaza like a held breath as Ray and Neary-Eye walked side by side toward the east corridor that led away from the ceremonial ring. The hum of air filters replaced the murmur of spectators. The scent of citrus mist from the cooling vents drifted through the air, trying to cover the smell of heated rope and dry sweat. No one stopped them. No one wanted to become the next exhibit. Ray's pulse finally slowed as they turned the corner into a narrow passage between glass walls. He felt the sweat under his collar start to cool, his body catching up to what his mind had already accepted. He had just defied a public law in broad daylight. But his thoughts didn't linger on punishment. They stayed on the woman walking beside him, barefoot, calm, and somehow proud, even with the marks still visible around her wrists. Neary-Eye noticed the way he kept glancing at the path ahead, scanning every reflective surface for security drones or city wardens. "You think they'll come for you?" she asked, her tone curious, not mocking. "They don't arrest for small rebellions," Ray said. "They send warnings first, then audits. It's neater that way." She gave a small nod, her eyes following a transport capsule gliding past the transparent wall. Neatness. That's what they worship here. Ray studied her face for the first time without the distortion of heat. She was younger than he'd thought, maybe late 20s, but her expression carried the weight of someone who'd learned to endure public judgment. "You're not from Halix originally," he said. "No," she replied. "I came from the border colonies. They invited me here 5 years ago, said the city needed voices from diverse lineages to refresh its art. Turns out they wanted the voices, not the faces." Her voice cracked slightly at the end. Ray didn't press. He'd heard versions of this story before. People brought in to make the city look open-minded, then disciplined when they refused to erase what made them distinct. "You sing," he said. "You weren't exaggerating earlier." "I performed for the Glass Galleria," she said. "Until today." They entered the arcade of quiet things, a corridor lined with suspended crystal leaves that chimed softly whenever the air shifted. The sound was delicate and exact, Halix's idea of beauty. Neary-Eye's steps were silent against the smooth tiles, but every few meters she winced as dust caught in the faint rope burns on her ankles. Ray noticed. "Wait," he said, stopping at a corner kiosk. The vendor behind the glass didn't ask questions when Ray requested a hydration patch and a cloth strip. He handed them over with the polite indifference that kept the city functioning. Ray paid in credits, pressed the patch into her palm. "Put this on your wrists. It'll cool the skin." Neri hesitated for a second, then obeyed. The patch hissed faintly as it activated. Relief flickered across her face. "You always carry spare credits for emergencies like this?" "I fix condenser leaks," he said. "Sometimes you need to bribe the repair AI to get water flow approved." That earned a faint smile from her, a small break in the guarded composure she'd held since the plaza. As they walked, Neri's eyes moved constantly, studying the passing pedestrians. Most of them avoided looking at her. Some recognized her from the ceremony, their gazes sliding away like glass repelling dust. The silence hurt more than open hostility. "They look at me and see trouble," she said quietly. "They'll forget by next week, until someone else is bound." "Maybe," Ray answered, "but you'll remember. And so will a few who saw me untie you." "That's enough for now." Neri frowned at him. "You sound sure of that." "I'm not sure," he admitted. "I just don't want to believe this city is entirely asleep." They reached a shaded square between two towers. The air was cooler here, faintly damp from the recycling misters that sprayed in rhythmic bursts. Ray stopped before a steel stairwell leading upward. "My place is up here," he said. Neri looked uncertain. "You don't even know who I am. You could lose your license for taking in a registered offender." "Already did the thing they'll find me for," he said simply. "Might as well finish it right." She didn't answer, but she followed him. The stairwell was narrow, the steps humming faintly with internal sensors that tracked resident movement. Ray entered a key code at the top door, his own unit's entrance. It opened with a soft hydraulic click, letting out a wave of cooled air and the faint smell of mineral water and citrus polish. Inside, the loft was simple. Pale concrete floors, a small hydro wall covered in green trailing vines, 2 chairs, 1 low couch. A folded blanket rested on the edge of the bed platform. Everything was clean, functional, arranged like a man who didn't want to think too much about what he owned. Neri stepped inside slowly, taking in every corner. Her instincts were still tuned to survival. Her eyes flicked to the window locks, the ventilation slats, the single exit. When she was satisfied, she let her shoulders drop slightly. "You live alone," she said, more as confirmation than question. "Long enough to stop noticing it," Ray replied. He took 2 glasses from a cabinet, filled one with filtered water and one with Zyron sunfruit nectar from a small canister. "Drink," he said, handing her the nectar. "It helps with dehydration." She accepted it, sipped, and blinked in surprise. "Sweet. Too sweet," he said. "Halix over-filters everything, even fruit." Her laugh was small but real. She set the cup down and looked at him carefully. "Why did you do it?" Ray leaned against the counter. The question didn't sound like accusation, more like a test. "Because no one else would," he said after a moment. "And because I knew I'd have to live with myself tonight if I didn't." "That's not a reason," she said. "That's guilt." He met her eyes. "Maybe, but it worked." She didn't argue. Her gaze softened. The silence between them wasn't tense anymore. It felt like 2 people listening to the same noise and finding comfort in it. After a few minutes, Ray walked to the wall rack and took down a white cotton shirt. "There's a washroom behind that door," he said. "You should clean off the sand. The water runs cold. Use whatever you find." Neri took the shirt, holding it up to her body as if measuring it. "You trust strangers easily," she said. "Not easily," he replied. "But I'd rather trust someone who just got punished for honesty than someone who watched and said nothing." She looked at him for a long second, then nodded and went down the short hall. The door closed with a quiet seal. Water began to run. Ray exhaled, realizing for the first time how tense his shoulders had been. He poured himself a cup of Furlan coffee from the brewer, letting the bitter smell fill the space. As he waited, his mind replayed the moment he'd knelt in the sand, the sound of the ropes, the heat against his hands, the weight of the eyes watching him. He wondered what he'd just started, what lines he'd crossed that couldn't be uncrossed. The shower stopped. Footsteps returned, lighter now. Neri reappeared wearing a shirt, her damp hair falling past her shoulders. The oversized fabric hid her more than it revealed, but something about it unsettled him. The simple domesticity of it, the proof that she was here in a space alive and unbound. She caught his glance, then looked down at her hands. "I'll find somewhere to go tomorrow," she said quietly. "I don't want to make you another problem." Ray shook his head. "You're not a problem," he said. "You just need time." Neri met his eyes again. "And you? I need to remember what it's like to do something that matters," he said. She didn't smile this time. She just nodded once, slow and understanding. Outside, the filtered wind pressed gently against the windows, carrying the city's constant hum. A perfect, ordered sound that somehow felt wrong now. Inside, they stood in the quiet, both realizing that neither of them had anywhere else to be. Night fell gradually over Helix Primaris, the city dimming in layers rather than darkness. Lights under the glass pavements brightened as the sky cooled from gold to steel. In Ray's loft, the sound of the external vents softened into a steady breath. Neri sat on the low couch, legs drawn close, his white shirt hanging loosely around her shoulders. She had washed away the dust, but faint red lines still circled her wrists and ankles like reminders that skin remembers what pride tries to forget. Ray placed a small plate of food on the table between them. Thin Varenroot slices fried crisp in Kirill oil and a small cup of cooled mineral water. It wasn't much, but it was clean and warm. Neri looked at the meal, then at him. "You plan to eat alone tonight," she said, reading the single plate. "I always do," he answered. Didn't plan to have company. Her lips pressed into something between amusement and exhaustion. "Then you've already broken 2 habits today." Ray sat across from her, elbows on his knees. The silence between them wasn't heavy this time. It was cautious, alive. He studied her quietly, noticing how she scanned every corner of the room, still assessing. "You don't trust walls, do you?" he asked. She shrugged lightly. "Walls remember things. You can feel when they've seen too much." He nodded once. He understood. The barracks he'd lived in during the war had the same air, rooms where people pretended to sleep but really just waited for alarms. "You'll be safe here," he said, and it sounded more like a promise than reassurance. Neri lifted her gaze. "You speak like someone who's used to giving orders but not used to being obeyed." Ray looked faintly surprised. "I was trained to lead teams," he said. "Maintenance crews now. Combat units before that." He paused, as if measuring how much to reveal. "I stopped after the Narration collapse. Too many people following orders that made no sense." "So you came here," she said, voice low, thoughtful, "to a city that runs entirely on obedience." That stung more than he expected. He leaned back, watching the slow rotation of the ceiling fan. "Maybe I thought a clean system meant a clean conscience." Neri traced a finger along the edge of her cup. "And now it feels like another uniform," he said. She nodded slowly, understanding something unspoken between them. "Then maybe we're both tired of performing for people who mistake silence for virtue." For a long moment, neither spoke. The air between them hummed faintly with the sound of the cooling wall and the soft chime of glass outside. Ray reached for the small medkit on the shelf and opened it, pulling out a tube of cooling gel. "Let me see your wrists," he said. Neri hesitated, but held them out. He applied the gel carefully, fingers steady. She didn't flinch, but he felt the tension in her arms. Years of learning not to react. "How long were you bound out there?" he asked quietly. 3 hours, she said. "It's the standard duration for visible correction. They like round numbers." Ray exhaled slowly through his nose. "Anyone ever intervened before?" "No one's that foolish," she said, studying him. "Until you." Her tone wasn't accusing, but the words carried weight. Ray didn't look up. "I didn't think about it. I just couldn't stand there." "You could have walked away," she said. "I did in my head. 10 times," he admitted. "Then something in me decided to move before I changed my mind." Her voice softened. "That's not weakness." "I know," he said, "but it's not heroism either. It's a refusal." Neri leaned back, arms folded lightly over her chest. She looked around again, her gaze lingering on a small, framed photo half hidden behind a plant, an old military unit, 6 men and 2 women, all younger, all wearing the same standard field uniforms. Ray caught her looking. "They're all gone," he said quietly. "Accident?" she asked. He shook his head. "Command decision. Wrong coordinates during extraction. I made it out. They didn't." She didn't offer sympathy. Just a calm, steady silence. The kind that doesn't try to fix pain, only shares its space. "So now you fix air filters," she said finally. Doesn't argue," he replied, a faint smile appearing for the first time. It was small, but it shifted the room. Neri smiled back, brief but genuine. "You're strange," she said softly. "Quiet men usually hide fear, not decency." "Maybe both," he said. She looked down, brushing her thumb across the rope mark that was already fading. "I was bound today because I refused to wear the mask," she said. "At civic recitals, the law says we must cover our faces so we look unified. They say it removes distraction. And you think your face distracts them?" Ray asked. She met his eyes directly. "They told me it does." I took that as a compliment. Ray laughed quietly. The sound surprised them both. For a second, the tension dissolved, and the room felt almost normal. After they finished eating, Ray stood and cleared the table. Neri watched him move, efficient, deliberate, like someone who'd taught himself how to stay occupied when words weren't enough. When he turned, she was still watching. "What?" he asked. "You move like you're always expecting something to go wrong," she said. He thought about denying it, but didn't. Old habit. Doesn't fade. Neri looked toward the door, then back at him. "If they trace you, if they come asking, what will you tell them?" "The truth," he said, "that I untied someone who shouldn't have been tied in the first place." "That's not how Helix defines truth," she said quietly. "I don't care how they define it," he answered. The firmness in his voice silenced her. She looked away, eyes glinting faintly under the cool white light. The city outside was almost unnaturally calm. Neon outlines reflected on metal walls, the sound of passing vehicles muted by engineered wind barriers. Ray noticed the fatigue setting into her posture. "You should rest," he said. "You can take the couch." Neri hesitated. "And you?" "I'll stay close," he said simply. "You don't have to worry." She nodded. "Not worried. Just not used to kindness that doesn't ask for anything." He met her eyes again. "Then you'll have to get used to it." She lay down on the couch, pulling the folded blanket over her legs. Ray took a floor cushion and sat nearby, leaning against the base of the hydro wall. The plants whispered softly as moisture dripped down their stems. Minutes passed. The sound of her breathing evened out. Ray stayed awake, staring at the faint light strip on the wall. His thoughts wandered to the plaza, to the crowd that had watched and done nothing. He wondered what line he had crossed, not with the city, but with himself. When Neri shifted slightly in her sleep, her hand fell from the couch, landing near his shoulder. He didn't move. He just looked at the faint mark around her wrist, already fading, and felt something steady settle inside him. Not guilt this time. Purpose. Outside, Helix kept shining, pretending to be perfect. Inside the small loft, 2 strangers who had broken its symmetry began, without realizing it, to build something the city had long forgotten, an honest silence that could hold 2 people without judgment. Morning light crept through the moisture screen, cutting the loft into narrow bands of gold. Ray woke before the city's automatic chimes began, still seated on the floor, his back stiff and his neck tight. Neri was asleep on the couch, one hand curled near her face, the other hanging loosely over the edge. Her breathing was slow, steady. The marks on her wrists had already faded to pale outlines. For a moment, Ray just sat there, studying the quiet. The night had passed without alarms, without knocks at the door. That felt unusual in a city that rarely forgot anything. He stood carefully, stretching his shoulders, and crossed to the counter. The habit of motion steadied him, water first, then heat, then sound. He filled a small pan with Varan root slices from the market packet and warmed them with Kirill oil. The smell was sharp and earthy, cutting through the faint metallic tang of recycled air. He poured himself a cup of Ferlin coffee, thick and bitter, then filled another with Zyra nectar for her. The first chime of the day rippled through the street outside. Helix's engineered morning hum began, a low vibration from power lines and distant transport capsules gliding overhead. It was the city reminding everyone that it was alive, efficient, and watching. Narration stirred. Her eyes opened slowly, disoriented for a second before recognition settled in. She blinked toward the ceiling. "You stayed," she said quietly, her voice rough from sleep. "I said I would," Ray replied, setting the plates down on the low table. "You hungry?" She sat up, adjusting the oversized shirt. "It smells real, not synthetic. That's the oil. The rest is from packet. Still better than anything they gave me after the arrest." She moved closer, the hem of his shirt brushing her knees as she sat cross-legged on the floor. Ray noticed she'd folded the blanket neatly, placed it back on the couch's arm. That small act told him she decided not to leave yet. They ate in silence for a minute, the food cooling quickly in the filtered air. Then Narration said, "You didn't ask if I'm wanted for anything else." Ray looked up from his plate. "Should I?" Her lips twitched faintly. "Probably. That's what people do when they take in strangers." "I already took you in," he said. "If there's something I should know, you'll tell me." She nodded, thinking, "No crimes. Just wrong kind of citizen. My family came from the outer rings of the Allen colonies. Migrants, not born into Helix code. The city lets us stay if we keep quiet, perform, and don't question the design. And you questioned it." "I sang without permission," she said simply. "And I sang something I wrote. It's called The Mass Cracks." They didn't like that. Ray almost smiled. "I can see why." Her expression softened. "You think I should have stopped?" He shook his head. "I think you already knew what it would cost." She looked down at her hands. "I did. I just didn't expect the silence to be worse than the punishment." Ray understood that too well. "The silence always costs more," he said. "You learn to stop noticing it. That's how they win." Their eyes met across the table. The conversation didn't feel like confession. It felt like calibration, both of them finding the edge of where trust began. After breakfast, Ray turned to his console at the far wall. A soft tone blinked on the screen, administrative fine pending. The system had traced his Civic ID to the plaza footage faster than he expected. Narration saw the message reflected on the polish counter. "They found you already." "Of course they did," he said, almost calmly. "The city likes paperwork more than confrontation." "What happens now?" "They'll deduct from my maintenance credits. Maybe flag me for review." "You're not worried?" "I stopped thinking fear keeps you safe." He shut the console off. Narration rose, crossing to the window. The city beyond the glass gleamed with ordered beauty, spiral towers, green-tinted domes, drones moving in perfect formation across the skyline. It looked peaceful if you didn't know how tightly everything was controlled. "It's hard to believe something so beautiful can be so cruel," she said softly. Ray joined her, his reflection standing beside hers. "It's not cruelty," he said. "It's precision. Cruelty at least feels human." She turned her head toward him. "And you still stay here?" "I tried leaving," he said, "after the war. But everywhere else was worse. At least here, people pretend to care." That answer didn't satisfy her, but she didn't argue. She understood the need for small lies that keep you moving. A brief silence followed before she asked, "Why did you really help me, Ray? Was it pity?" He looked at her, the question landing harder than she expected. "No," he said. "It was recognition." She frowned slightly. "Recognition of what?" "Someone refusing to kneel when the world tells them it's easier that way." Narration didn't reply. She just watched him for a long second. Her eyes weren't guarded anymore. "That's dangerous thinking," she said finally. "I'm used to danger." Her gaze shifted to the counter where the ropes from yesterday lay coiled neatly. Ray hadn't thrown them away. "You kept them," she said. "They're evidence," he said, "and a reminder." "Of what?" "That sometimes freedom looks small and stupid when it happens, but it still matters." The words hit her harder than she wanted to admit. She turned back to the window, hiding her face. The city glowed in mirrored perfection below. People moved like patterns on a screen, all synced, all polite. Ray moved to the shelf and pulled out a folded pair of fabric slippers. "These might fit," he said, placing them beside her. "You can't walk the streets barefoot. The floor sensors will flag you." She glanced at them, then up at him. You keep women's shoes around often? They belong to someone who left a long time ago, he said, his tone even. You can use them until you get your own. Neri hesitated, then slipped them on. They fit perfectly. What happened to her? She asked quietly. She decided to blend in, Ray said, and I decided not to. Neri understood without needing more detail. So she left. Yes, he said, and you should, when you can. Her brow furrowed. You want me to leave? I want you to have the choice, he said simply. The city won't give it to you. She stood there for a moment, processing that. I won't run, she said finally. If they want me, they'll have to take me again. Then we'll deal with that when it happens, Ray said. His tone wasn't dramatic, just steady. The city chimes shifted again, signaling the start of work cycles. Ray put on his coat and pulled a small identification badge from the wall hook. I have to check the filter lines near the market, he said. You'll be safe here. The building's old, sensors weak. Neri moved toward him. You trust me alone in your home? I already decided to, he said, half smiling. She watched him at the door. You could report me. Turn this around. They'd clear your record. I could, he said, but then I'd have to live with it. Ray left quietly, the door sealing behind him with a soft pneumatic sigh. Neri stood in the center of the room, staring at the small space he'd left behind. 2 cups, 1 half-finished plate, the faint smell of coffee and Kirill oil still hanging in the air. She felt the strange pull of something she hadn't felt in years. Safety mixed with fear of losing it. She turned toward the mirror near the door, touching the faint lines on her wrists. They were fading. The city outside was too bright to hide from. She took a long breath and whispered, not to him but to herself, I won't wear their mask again. Then she sat down at a small console, fingers hovering above the keys. Her face reflected on the screen, bare, unfiltered, alive. She began typing slowly, opening a document, rewriting the lyrics of the song that had gotten her punished. If Helix wanted a performance, she would give them one. Only this time, the city would hear the voice it tried to silence. And far across the district, Ray paused mid-step on the market street, sensing something shift, not in the air, but inside himself. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like a maintenance worker. He felt like someone standing on the edge of a decision that mattered. The day passed under the bright hum of Helix's routine perfection. Ray spent his shift walking through the narrow maintenance tunnels beneath the north sector. Long corridors lined with glass pipes that pulsed faintly with recycled air. The city's automated systems handled most of the work, but human signatures were still required for oversight. That was his role now, a name on a checklist. It should have been peaceful, but his thoughts kept drifting back to the loft. He wondered if Neri had stayed. He scanned the filter valves, entered his ID into the console, and paused when the system flashed a yellow notice. Citizen under review, behavioral deviation recorded. The words had no sound, but he felt them in his gut. His actions yesterday were officially logged. He shut the alert off before it could send a ping. The fine was one thing, surveillance was another. Still, he didn't regret it. By the time he reached the surface again, the streets had started to cool. Vendors opened stalls filled with filtered water canisters, synthetic fruits, and packs of processed grain. The air smelled faintly of ozone and citrus, a smell that belonged more to machines than to plants. He bought a small packet of mirin jam and a loaf of Zyron bread, simple things that didn't draw attention, and began the walk home. The building's entrance scanner blinked red once, then turned green. Someone had entered before him. His pulse quickened, not with fear but alertness. He climbed the stairs, silent and measured. When he opened the door, he found Neri at the window. She wasn't hiding. She stood in plain view, wearing her own clothes again, washed and repaired from what she'd brought yesterday. The violet fabric caught the afternoon light, looking softer now, less ceremonial, more her. She turned as he entered, her expression unreadable. You came back, she said simply. I live here, he replied, closing the door. So do you for now. She smiled faintly at the wording, but said nothing. He placed the food on the counter. You went out. No, she said. I stayed inside. Read your data pads. I learned how much this city hides behind polite words. Ray tilted his head. You were curious. I was angry, she corrected. but reading helps me control it. He nodded. Good habit. Neri crossed the room, barefoot, silent on the concrete floor. You know they'll question you soon, she said. The system doesn't forgive visible defiance. I know, he said. They'll call it a behavioral discrepancy. They like small words for big things. Her eyes studied him. You sound too calm about it. He met her gaze. Panic doesn't help. I learned that the hard way. What happened? She asked softly. He hesitated, then leaned against the counter, folding his arms. During the war, I followed a wrong order. It cost 7 people their lives. The commander called it a logistical miscalculation. That was the day I stopped believing in calm that hides cowardice. Neri's voice was quiet. So now you act when everyone else stays still. He nodded once. Or I try to. She stepped closer. You think I should leave? I think you want to stay, he said. Her lips parted slightly, but she didn't answer. The moment hung between them, charged and quiet. He turned away, opening the packet of bread and setting the table. You rewrote your song, he said without looking up. Neri froze. How did you know? You left the console on. She exhaled, unsure whether to apologize or defend herself. It's not the same song. I changed the tone. Softer, but it still says what I mean. He placed the bread down, tore it into 2 pieces, and handed her one. Then you should sing it again. She blinked. That's what got me bound. It's also what made you who you are, he said. You can hide from it or own it. Either way, the city will judge you. Might as well give them a reason worth judging. Neri studied him carefully. You talk like someone who stopped fearing death. I just stopped mistaking survival for living, he said. She looked down, her hand tightening on the bread. If I sing again, will you come? Yes. He said it simply, no hesitation. That steadiness unnerved her more than any promise could. She wanted to trust it, but didn't know how. If they punish me again, you'll be marked as complicit, she said. I already am, he replied. The silence that followed wasn't cold. It was full, dense with unspoken understanding. Neri stepped closer, reaching for his wrist. Why are you like this, Ray? She asked. You act as if every choice is already paid for. He looked at her hand against his skin, her fingers brushing the scar where a field chip used to be. Because I've learned that good things cost the same as bad ones. You just decide which you'd rather pay for. Her hand stayed there for a long second before she pulled it back. You really think there's good left in this place? There's good in people who remember what it looks like, he said. She looked at him longer this time. The city's filtered sunlight caught her silver-ringed eyes, making them glint like polished glass. For the first time, she didn't look cornered. She looked alive. That night, they sat together by the window, sharing the last of the Zyran nectar. The glass walls reflected the city's artificial glow. From this height, Helix looked perfect again, symmetrical, silent, self-satisfied. Ray saw none of that. He saw a single reflection of a woman leaning her head against the window, eyes half closed, her body still marked, but her expression at peace. Will you sing tomorrow? He asked quietly. Yes, she said, but not for them. For me. He nodded. That's the right audience. When she turned toward him, her face inches from his, the air shifted. No words, no declarations, just 2 people in the quiet of a city that didn't know what to do with sincerity. Her breath brushed his cheek before she looked away again. Neither of them spoke after that. The night stretched on, steady and soft. Somewhere far below, the civic speakers played the curfew chime. A clean voice announced, "Rest in compliance, citizens of Helix." But inside that small loft, compliance had already been broken in the simplest, most human way possible. 2 people choosing not to look away. The next morning started with a gray, muted light filtering through the mist vents. Helix's sky never turned blue. It stayed in gradients of silver and pale yellow, reflecting the color of its glass towers. Ray sat at the small table, already dressed for his shift, drinking coffee that had gone cold. He'd been awake for hours, thinking. Neri was still asleep on the couch, curled beneath the thin blanket, her breathing slow, calm. It struck him how quickly her presence had changed the space. His loft, once silent and lifeless, now felt lived in. A cup left half full, a hair tie on the counter, a faint smell of violet fabric drying near the vent. He watched her for a long moment before looking away. He knew what would come next. The city wouldn't stay quiet. Helix didn't forgive defiance. It processed it. Punishments weren't about pain. They were about turning individuals into patterns again. He wondered if Nerii understood that her freedom now existed only because the system was still deciding how to respond. The work terminal on the wall flashed. He tapped it, and a message expanded in polite white text. Civic Review Notice. Behavioral Audit Scheduled. 0900 Standard Time. He read it twice, feeling the same dull calm that had guided him in the sand ring. The city was moving on him now, not violently, just efficiently. When Nerii woke, she stretched slowly, blinking at the light. Her voice was rough from sleep. "You're still here," she said, her tone mixed between relief and disbelief. "Where else would I be?" She pushed herself up, brushing her hair back. "I thought maybe you'd decide this wasn't worth it." "I already decided it was," he said. She nodded, quiet for a few seconds. "They'll come for you, won't they? They'll ask questions first. Maybe suspend my license." "Will that ruin you?" "No," he said. "Just make it harder to live comfortably." Nerii looked at him carefully, as though searching for fear. There was none. "You act like you expected this," she said. "I did." "Why?" "Because the city hates loose ends," he said. "And we made one." She rose and walked to the sink, rinsing her face with cold, filtered water. The simple act looked ceremonial, as if washing off the memory of the sand. Her reflection in the metal surface looked steadier today, less fragile. "I'll sing again tonight," she said quietly. "At the Galleria?" Ray turned from the console. "You're sure?" "Yes. You were right. If I don't own it, it owns me." He didn't argue. "Then I'll be there." She frowned slightly. "You don't have to risk more." He met her eyes. "I want to." The exchange ended there. Neither of them tried to name what that meant. By midday, the city's drones began their inspection rounds, hovering low between towers, recording movement patterns. Ray stayed inside until the hum passed, then left for his review. Nerii watched him go, her chest tight, not with fear, but with the unfamiliar pull of concern. The Civic Review Center was located above the South Plaza, a transparent structure where meetings happened in full view of the public. Ray stood before 3 administrators seated behind a glass panel. Their faces were calm, courteous. The lead official spoke first. "Mr. Vardon, it appears you interfered with a public disciplinary display yesterday. You are aware that the civic infraction under Article 8. Yes. Your actions disrupted a sanctioned event. The subject in question, Citizen Nerii Sora, was under lawful correction." Ray kept his tone even. She was restrained for refusing to wear a mask, not for violence or theft. The official tilted his head. "Intent isn't relevant. Public order requires consistency." "Then maybe the order is wrong," Ray said. A pause followed. The woman on the far left tapped her console. "You're maintenance technician, correct? No longer military?" "Correct. Your file indicates prior disciplinary warnings during service. For disobeying orders that killed civilians," Ray said flatly. The woman glanced at her superior, uncomfortable. The lead official cleared his throat. "We're not here to revisit the war, Mr. Vardon. The issue is compliance. We recommend a reduction of civic privileges and relocation review if further anomalies occur." Ray understood the message beneath the words. "Behave, or we'll make you disappear quietly." He nodded once. "Understood. You may go," the official said, dismissing him like a paperwork line. When Ray stepped outside, the filtered light felt heavier. The city stretched endlessly in front of him, clean, symmetrical, sterile. For the first time, he felt no belonging to it at all. He walked home slowly, blending with the crowd. No one looked twice at him. That was Helix's trick. It erased people not by force, but by indifference. When he reached his building, the smell of Kirill oil hit him before he opened the door. Inside, Nerii was standing near the counter, wearing the same violet wrap from the day before. She'd cooked something simple, fragrant. When she saw him, her shoulders eased. "You came back," she said. "I always come back." Her eyes searched his face. "They didn't detain you?" "Not yet." She looked down at the food. "Then eat while you still can." He sat. The food was basic Varan stew thickened with dried grain, but it tasted human, not processed. They ate quietly. When they finished, Ray said, "You should be ready for tonight. The Galleria will have surveillance." "I know," she said. "That's why I'm going." He watched her clean the table, methodical, almost peaceful. "You're not afraid?" "I am," she said. "But fear doesn't disappear. You just learn to stand with it." Later, as dusk settled, they walked through the arcade together. The crystal leaves chimed faintly above them, scattering soft blue light on the tiles. Neri walked barefoot in her borrowed slippers, her stride even. People glanced, whispered, but no one intervened. The city's politeness worked in their favor again. No one wanted to start a scene. The Galleria loomed ahead, a dome of translucent glass that pulsed with color as the internal lights adjusted. Performers rehearsed inside, their voices filtered and echoing. Neri paused at the threshold, breathing in slowly. Ray stepped beside her. "You don't owe them anything," he said. "I know," she answered. "That's what makes this mine." She stepped inside. The audience was smaller than before, curious, cautious. The officials had likely warned them that another incident might occur. Neri climbed onto the platform, bare shoulders reflecting the dim light. The hall quieted as the music faded. She stood there without a mask, eyes forward. Then she sang. Her voice was clear, not defiant, but honest. Low tones carrying through the air like a current, weaving between the metallic walls. The lyrics were simple, almost plain, about breath, about seeing one another, about refusing to vanish behind rules that called themselves order. The sound wasn't loud, but it reached every corner. Ray stood at the back, arms crossed, watching the audience. Some turned away. Others stayed frozen. No one moved to stop her. When the final note ended, silence stretched for a heartbeat. Then someone clapped. One, then two, then more. The applause wasn't thunderous, but it was real. Ray exhaled. Neri met his eyes across the distance, her expression unreadable but steady. In that moment, the city's entire illusion of control felt fragile. When she stepped off the stage, Ray was already waiting near the exit. She didn't smile. Neither did he. But as they walked out together into the night, their silence was the loudest sound Helix had heard all day. The air outside the Galleria was cooler now, brushed with faint rain from the high condensation vents. The city lights scattered across the damp pavement like fractured mirrors, reflecting silver against Neri's skin. She walked beside Ray, still quiet from the performance, her breath steady but shallow. For the first time since she'd come to Helix, people had applauded her without permission. The sound still echoed in her head, small, uncertain claps that meant more than any scripted praise. Ray stayed close but didn't speak. He could tell she was replaying every second, testing whether what she'd done felt like defiance or freedom. His eyes kept scanning the plaza edges out of habit, searching for the soft glint of patrol drones or the too casual stance of civic officers. None appeared. The city had decided to wait to observe. That was worse than confrontation. It meant they were calculating. They turned into a narrow street that curved between two glass towers. The sound of the Galleria faded behind them, replaced by the distant hum of air recyclers. Neri broke the silence first. "They'll remember tonight," she said. "Maybe not my name, but the silence after I finished." "They will," Ray said. "Helix notices everything it can't control. It just pretends not to." She stopped walking, turning to face him under the soft neon wash of event light. "You didn't look afraid," she said. "Not once. Even when the officials came in earlier." "I was," he answered. "Just not the kind that freezes you." "What kind, then?" "The kind that moves you anyway." Her mouth curved faintly. "You hide your fear well." "Old training," he said, glancing at her hands. "Yours." "Stage training," she replied. "Different goal, same purpose." They started walking again. The rain intensified, thin sheets falling in rhythmic taps against the glass walls. Ray's coat absorbed most of it, but Neri's wrap clung to her shoulders. Without comment, he took it gently and draped his coat around her. She looked at him, surprised by the quiet gesture. "You keep doing that," she said softly. "What?" making the world gentler without saying a word. He didn't answer, but his eyes held hers long enough for her to look away first. When they reached the loft, the street was nearly empty. He keyed in the door code, and they stepped inside, shaking off the rain. The smell of wet fabric and city air filled the room. Narration stood near the hydro wall, still wrapped in his coat. She glanced toward the table where the coiled ropes lay, the ones he had never thrown away. "You could burn them," she said. "I thought about it," Ray admitted. "Then I thought maybe they should stay until no one ever needs to see them again." Her gaze lingered on the ropes. "You think this city will ever reach that point?" "No," he said, "but people might." The faint smile that crossed her lips was tired but real. She sat down on the couch, tucking her knees under his coat. "When I was tied there, I told myself I'd never trust anyone again," she said quietly. "I didn't think I'd break that rule so soon." Ray poured 2 cups of water, set one beside her. "You didn't break it," he said. "You rewrote it." She looked at him for a long moment. "You make it sound simple." "It never is," he said, "but it's a start." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the rain against the window. The sound was steady, hypnotic. Narration leaned back, letting her head rest against the cushion. "When you left the army," she asked, "did you ever think you'd end up fixing air filters?" Ray shook his head, half smiling. "No, I thought I'd build something quiet. Turns out, quiet doesn't fix much." "And now," he looked at her, "now I think I was waiting for something that made the noise worth it again." She understood what he meant, even if he didn't say it directly. Her fingers brushed the edge of his coat near her collarbone. The contact was small, unintentional, but it drew his attention like a spark. "Ray," she said softly, "if they come for you because of me—" "They already came," he interrupted gently. "And I'm still here." The room went still. Neri's hand lingered on the coat. "Then stay with me," she said quietly. "At least until morning." He hesitated, not out of uncertainty, but out of restraint. The same discipline that had kept him alive in too many dangerous places. Then he moved closer, sitting beside her. The air between them shifted, thickened. She turned her face toward him. The kiss came slowly, deliberate. No hesitation, no pretense, just 2 people who had run out of reasons to be cautious. Her hands slid around his shoulders, the coat falling from her lap. He answered with equal calm, one hand resting at the small of her back, the other tracing her jawline. The room filled with the faint rhythm of rain, the hum of the wall vents, the quiet sound of breath meeting breath. When they pulled apart, Narration exhaled shakily, her forehead resting against his. "I didn't think I'd ever feel human again," she said. "You never stopped being," Ray said. "You just needed someone to remind you." She smiled faintly, eyes half closed. "And you needed someone to make you stop pretending you were only surviving." "Maybe," he said. "Maybe I just needed proof that this city doesn't decide everything." The night stretched around them. The rain outside softened to a whisper. Narration leaned against him, half asleep, the rhythm of her breathing steady. Ray watched the light shift across the ceiling, feeling something settle in him that hadn't in years. Peace that didn't demand silence, connection that didn't require control. He knew tomorrow the city would react. He knew his audit might turn into suspension, maybe even arrest. But for now, none of it mattered. The sound of rain, her warmth against his shoulder, and the quiet certainty of what they had chosen, that was all that existed. Outside, the towers of Helix glowed white in the mist, unaware that somewhere in its precise machinery, 2 people had broken its pattern. Morning arrived soft and pale, filtered through layers of mist that drifted past the window. The sound of the rain had stopped, replaced by the steady hum of the city waking into its schedule. Ray woke first, still seated on the couch's edge, Narration resting against his shoulder. For a few seconds, he didn't move. The calm felt fragile, like something that could vanish if he breathed too loudly. He eased his arm free and stood, stretching his stiff legs. The smell of yesterday's Kirill oil lingered faintly in the air. Narration stirred, her hair brushing her face. She blinked against the light, eyes soft but clear. "What time is it?" she asked, her voice husky from sleep. "Early," Ray said. before the civic chime. She sat up slowly, wrapping the blanket around her. "They'll come soon," she murmured. "Maybe," he said. "Maybe not." She looked at him, at the way he moved, calm and measured, as if every motion had already been thought through. "You always sound like you've made peace with losing everything," she said quietly. He turned toward her, pouring 2 cups of coffee. "That's the thing about peace," he said. "You only find it when you stop trying to earn it." She smiled faintly at that, taking the cup from him. "I used to think peace was obedience," she said. "Now it feels more like disobedience that doesn't need a shout." They drank in silence for a while. Outside, the mist thinned, revealing the reflection of the city in the window, towers gleaming, the distant shimmer of transports, order reasserting itself. But inside the loft, it felt different. The same space that had once been sterile now felt like a home in motion. 2 mugs, a discarded coat, the faint warmth still clinging to the couch. Narration stood and began dressing, pulling on her repaired violet wrap. Her movements were slow, deliberate. "I'm not running," she said firmly. "If they come, I'll face them." "I know," Ray said, "but they might not come for you. They might come for me." She turned toward him sharply. "Then I'll speak. I'll tell them I forced you." Ray smiled, just enough for her to see it. "That's not how this works. Helix doesn't punish for force. It punishes for choice." Her jaw tightened. "Then I'll choose with you." He stepped closer, touching her wrist gently. "You already did." There was nothing romantic in his tone. It was something deeper, a recognition, a quiet truth neither of them could undo. They spent the rest of the morning waiting, not in fear, but in readiness. Ray checked the console once. No new messages. The administrative system had gone silent, which was unusual. Helix never stayed quiet without reason. Narration noticed his expression. "You think they're ignoring you?" "I think they're deciding what narrative fits best," he said. "They can't erase what you did last night, but they can reframe it. Probably call it an unsanctioned display of civic spirit. Which means they'll pretend it was planned," Ray said, a trace of bitter amusement in his tone. "It's easier to absorb rebellion than to fight it." Narration leaned against the window, watching the clouds drift past the skyline. "Then let them. I didn't sing for them." "Who did you sing for?" She looked at him, her voice steady. "For the ones who didn't move when they wanted to. For the ones who stayed quiet because no one gave them a reason to speak." Ray nodded slowly. "Then you did more than most." Hours passed without interruption. The city remained indifferent. Narration helped tidy the loft, folded the blanket, washed the cups, straightened the counter. Each small act carried weight, an unspoken claim over the space. Ray noticed but didn't stop her. Watching her move through his home felt like watching balance return to something he hadn't realized was broken. By afternoon, the console finally blinked. One message. Ray opened it. Administrative notice. Civic fine resolved. Case closed. Citizen Vardon, authorized for continued service. Citizen Narration and Sora, granted temporary exemption for artistic contribution to public morale. He read it twice, then exhaled through his teeth. "They rewrote us," he said. Narration stepped beside him, reading the words over his shoulder. "So, they made us part of the story." "Exactly." She laughed once, low and real. Helix can't stand losing control. It turns even disobedience into decoration. Ray turned to her. "They can write whatever version they want. We'll know the real one." She nodded, the laughter fading into something gentler. "And what's the real one, Ray?" "That we decided," he said simply. "Everything after that belongs to us." Evening came early. The sky dimmed to copper, lights flickering on in measured patterns across the towers. Ray prepared a small meal, Larnsalt crisps, reheated Varan root, and 2 glasses of sunfruit nectar. Narration lit the wall lamp, the glow soft against her skin. They ate quietly, the peace between them no longer fragile but settled. When she finished, she stood and went to the window again. "I want to perform again," she said. "Not for the city, for the people. The ones who smiled today because someone dared to." Ray joined her. "You will," he said, "and I'll be there. Quiet, loud enough." She turned to him, her expression calm, eyes catching the faint light. "You always say that, quiet, loud enough. What does it mean? It means I don't need to shout for you to know I'm here, he said. The silence that followed was full, steady. She reached out, resting her hand on his chest. His heartbeat was slow, even. Then stay, she said softly. I'm not going anywhere, he replied. Outside, Halix glittered with engineered perfection. Inside, two people stood close, bound not by fear or obedience, but by something the city had no language for. Choice without permission, love without a script. Later, when the lights dimmed and the misters whispered through the vents, Neary fell asleep against him again, the rhythm of her breath syncing with the pulse of the wall. Ray watched the rain begin anew on the glass. The city would keep moving tomorrow, polishing its image, rewriting its stories. But in one small loft above its perfect streets, something unrecorded and ungoverned had taken root. He smiled faintly to himself and closed his eyes. For once, there were no alarms to wait for, no orders to anticipate, no decisions left unmade. Just morning waiting to happen again, on their terms. And that, in Halix Primaris, was the rarest rebellion of all.